Chapter 14 Agosto. The people who had raised us also needed to be taken into account, and the dynamics in the house seemed a credit to them. Your mum and dad must have been lovely people, Stephen commented as we lay in bed one night. They were. Changing colours. A track through the forest above us leads to Villanova, and here the ground is covered with seed pods dropped from above. A few months earlier, the trees' flowers had contributed to the yellow landscape, but the colour of the strips of seeds is the deep purple of a bruise. Yet here it looks beautiful. On flatter, open terrain, breezes dance across the land and make whirls of dust that remind me of dancers spinning round, skirts and coattails billowing into circles, while the green spikes of last month's rapidly growing grasses have thickened and turned yellow. Small and large areas alike resemble wheat fields by the second week of August. So much so that when Stephen and I drive past them, we find ourselves humming the theme tune to The Little House on the Prairie as we picture our Ingalls running through the similar looking landscape in the opening credits of the programme we watched as children. Sharing the rural scene are grasses more delicate than the ones mentioned above, and these are shimmering starched silk threads, while outside our bathroom window, bursting through the vines which grow on a high terrace just opposite, are golden firework displays. In our garden, we decide to stop fighting nature and we build a frame which we hope our tenacious grapevine will trowel over. Porto once more, neighbours and amigos. We were too difficult people to teach a lesson. Our history of not easily finding places had begun in September the previous year, when we had difficulty locating our solicitor's office in Lausanne. And it could be presumed that we would have ensured we had a detailed map which showed the office of the Honorary British Council when we went to Porto to collect Stephen's official cancellation of UK residency. But no. Our appointment was for 10:30, and Stephen and I left Linda at home around 6 o'clock in the morning. We had allowed for commuter traffic approaching Portugal's second largest city, and for goods vehicles starting or finishing deliveries, and we comfortably arrived in the centre of Porto at a few minutes past 9 o'clock. I say we did not have a detailed map, but we did have an AA guidebook with us and believed the tourist map in this would put us in the general neighbourhood. No doubt an imposing column-fronted building or similar grandiose statement for the British consulate would pinpoint our destination. Stephen parked the car in a car park which was really no more than a corner of disused land that had a new tarmac pavement bordering one side and a potholed surface leading into narrow streets and warehouses making up the cityscape behind us. We left the car, and from the more welcoming surface we saw a busy road a few metres off. The sight of shops and cafes suggested it was a promising place to start our search, and because there was an obvious lack of offices or grand state buildings lining the street, when we noticed an estate agent's, I proposed going in and asking them where to find the address on the email Stephen had printed off. Bom dia! Bom dia! Pode ajudar-nos? Queremos encontrar isso. At which point we held out the email and pointed at the address. We were asked if we were on foot or in a car, and we replied that we could walk or use the car and inquired which was better in terms of ease to our destination. Directions by car were given, but as on the previous occasion we had been to Porto, trying to find the hotel my friend was at, our brains processed the first few lefts and rights and then stopped trying. We gave our thanks nonetheless, and once in Betsy, having executed nearly all the esquerdas and direitas our brains had retained, we encountered the light railway line, which is the Porto metro system. The track appeared to block the next left we believed we should take, but we saw a policeman who was strolling along the pavement and we stopped to ask fresh directions from him. The helpful officer knew the area we wanted, if not the exact address. And from the new set of instructions, it now appeared that we needed to return to higher ground rather than drive around the lowlands we had descended to since leaving the estate agents. But we were on the right side of the metro tracks, after all, and not a great distance away. Somewhere a clock struck 10. After climbing a hill and recognizing the area we had driven through just before parking the car an hour earlier, dead ends and one-way roads conspired to take us down into shop-lined areas once more, and we found ourselves near a taxi rank. Steve and I knew by now that we would not make our appointment time, but felt confident that we would be able to be only a little late, and that after explaining the situation we would be dealt with anyway. So, after parking the car, I asked to be told where to go for a third time. The two drivers I spoke with not only knew the general area, but the exact location of the office of the Honorary British Consul. Yet, unfortunately, their uncertainty was about how to reach it from where we were. Still, I reported the new set of directions back to Stephen, and we set off again. At lunchtime, sitting in a lovely landscaped garden outside Porto's town hall, we ate our cheese rolls and poured coffee from our trusty flask. The sun shone, and we had a view over the river a good distance below us and many roads away. During the course of the morning, Steve and I had, several times, got short-tempered with each other, but by now we had abandoned hope of fulfilling what we had gone to Porto to do. And with the pressure lifted, we could joke about what a couple of burros, Portuguese for donkeys, we were. Knowing we would have to return another day to procure the documents we needed, we decided to continue our search for the office, and having found ourselves outside the Câmara Municipal, we reckoned it was worth inquiring there. Some people go out of their way to help, and the man we approached at the reception desk in the local government building was one of those people. Although he did not know the address we had asked for, he contacted a department he believes would be able to help. Following the brief telephone conversation, Steve and I were invited behind the reception desk to view an online map directory, and the government employee explained the area we were looking at and how to reach it. An attempt was made to print out the map for us, but the printer at reception did not wish to comply with the request, so we offered a pen and paper. Stephen made notes, and a tourist guide to Porto was also given to us, which we accepted gladly. Later than planned, we fittingly found the office of the Honorary British Consul in the heart of the Port District, where the gutters were stained ruby and the air scented with trade headed for Britain. Even when only a few metres away from the office, we had still covered the length of the road twice before desperation and the same tenacity as our grapevine meant we stretched a tendril down a side street, and it was here that we followed a narrow lane which led to a narrower lane. We walked up to the reception window of a modest whitewashed building where a security guard sat watching us approach. He confirmed that this was the address on the email, and also, as Stephen had been told when booking the appointment, the office hours were until 1 o'clock only, and it was 2 o'clock by the time that we were there. We felt tired, but at least the day had not been wasted, because next time we would know exactly where we were going. We covered the couple of 100 metres back to where we had parked the car. Déjà vu. Betsy waited in a car park, which was only really a disused area of land, bordered by tarmac on one side and potholed ground leading to narrow warehouse streets on the other. The return to Porto the following week, when we finally had our request dealt with, was not in an office as we had expected, but in the reception area, handled by the Honourable Consul's secretary. The day was considerably less time consuming than the previous occasion had been, and the secretary was friendly and efficient as she processed details and the €148 fee. We left the city in possession of another jigsaw piece and decided we would make the slight detour of Adel on the way home and see how things went once more at the customs office. At the Alfandega, we were required to purchase 2 documents, which cost a few centimes each, and as lunch hour approached, we were given a disused desk and told we needed to complete the forms before our request for exemption for import tax could be processed. The documents were, of course, in Portuguese, and much of the vocabulary was specific to the procedure we were attempting, and hence not in our pocket dictionary. We did what we could through deduction, guesswork, and limited basic language, and by the time we had finished, workers were back at desks. Once again, we approached the employee and were referred to a man who spoke some English and was very understanding and helpful concerning the details we had not managed to enter onto the documents. As José entered data into the system, there was some doubt over the acceptability of one of the items Stephen had taken along as proof of previous UK residency. But it was accepted provisionally, and Stephen said he would forward further proof by email. 5 months after what we had considered to be the beginning of importing our car, we left customs with a document which stated the procedure as having been officially started. During the time we had been in Porto, Linda had been enjoying a day of shopping with Mary, and when we arrived at our friend's house, the 2 of them were in the garden doing crosswords. During my sister's stay with us, she had also done a lot of the running around connected to registering our car in Portugal, and following Aunt Elsie's visit, dwindling funds meant that there were few times in which we even had a coffee out for the rest of Lynn's stay. So Mary's offer to spend a little time with Lynn and save her accompanying us on yet another toing and froing was one we had appreciated. Our ties with our other English friend tightened further during this month when he asked Stephen and me if we were interested in feeding his chickens a couple of times a week. Chicken John, as we affectionately nicknamed him, had between 40 and 50 fowls, which were due to be rehoused in 6 cages built slightly further away from the house than the current 2 large cages. A difference of opinion had recently led John to part company with the man who had been looking after the chickens, and although money was not mentioned, it was understood that a wage would be paid for the job of looking after the birds. Despite wishing to keep time spent with expats to a minimum, I saw an opportunity to contribute something to the household accounts, and after asking Stephen if I could have the job of chicken feeder, it was agreed, and my new career was scheduled to formally start in September. Closer to home, our neighbourhood remained a person down. Following her fall the previous month, Maria was still in hospital, and Stephen and I asked the Major if it would be all right for us to visit her. Without his wife around, our neighbour seemed lost, and Stephen and I too felt a piece of our Portugal was missing. We greatly missed seeing Maria pass our house, and equally the friendly waves we exchanged with the 2 octogenarians when we passed them working in their fields. Our request to go to the hospital took the Major by surprise, and that surprise made him momentarily forget the ward Maria was on. For our part, we forgot almost instantly the detailed directions which were given to us, but we had often seen signs for the University Hospital in Coimbra, and that is where we headed the following day. Unusually for us, we found our destination almost without incident. And Linda, Stephen, and I parked the car in the hospital grounds and walked into what we presumed was the main building. We approached the reception desk, and I said that we were here to visit a neighbour who had been admitted a couple of weeks previously. There was a momentary panic when we were asked her name, but fortunately I remembered it from the conversation which had taken place with our friends when emergency phone numbers had been written down and mobile numbers exchanged. Yet in Portugal, a woman does not take her husband's name when she marries, and instead family names can be added to family names until the time comes when the ink from several pens is needed just to sign a document. The hospital had a Maria Jose, something or other, registered as a patient, and although the final name was new to us, age, date of admission, and injury suggested it was the same person. A man and a woman in their forties were around the bed when we entered the ward, but on seeing us, the man had walked away while the younger of the Major and Maria's daughters introduced herself to us. We spent only 10 or 15 minutes with the two women and learnt that our neighbour's progress had been delayed due to a fall she had the previous night, and as a result, there was no date being mentioned on which Maria would return home. On first seeing her, we had noticed little difference. The slight build was the same as when we had seen her walking past our house. But during the short conversation, we perceived a frailty in her face, which we had never noticed before. And by the time we left, it was difficult not to be swept up in the forlorn atmosphere of that stifling hospital ward in which an old lady sat teary and complaining of the cold. We only visited Maria in hospital that once, and the short time we were there seems disproportionate to the value she placed upon it, something which became evident on the occasions the story resurfaced and was recounted by her to our friends and family who visited from England. We had our first invitation to have a drink with another neighbour during this month. He was the man who we'd spoken to when first settling in and depositing the old rug by the bins. There were many Manels in our village, and we nicknamed this one Manel J, the J being short for Jovem, which means young in Portuguese, because he was the youngest we knew at the time. Manel J was one of the people we found easiest to understand. This most likely being because of his wider experience of life outside the village. The drink in his wine cellar was accompanied by a plate of presunto and a dish of tremoso he and his wife had prepared, of which Stephen ate nothing. I ate a small amount to be polite, and Lynn saved the day by accepting something every time a plate or dish went her way. Lynn may have provided help of a different sort a few days later if Stephen had listened more to what she said concerning the behaviour of outdoor cats, but my sister lacked the courage of conviction to be heard. One afternoon, Muffin arrived home around the usual 5 o'clock time that she and her sister now associated with their evening meal, but Biscuit failed to show. Stephen became concerned immediately. His fear that the cats would not adapt to the new life we had chosen for them had never disappeared, and topographical features such as the open wells and water tanks, which are common near our home, heightened his concern. So when daylight had disappeared and Biscuit still had not returned, Stephen's worry mounted. Lynn and I thought my Marido's worry was a slight overreaction, she being used to her two cats occasionally staying out, and me because until that time there had been nothing to worry about. I presumed Biscuit was having an adventure somewhere close. Yet Stephen's reactions were reasonable when viewed as those of someone who cared deeply for family members he had protected and nursed as they grew from kittens into friends that had been his companions during the losses of business, lovers and self-esteem, and the only constants in his life. By the morning, His appearance told a tale of restless hours, and following breakfast, Stephen phoned Mary to ask if she had been into Joyce and Steve's house the previous day, thinking there was a possibility Biscuit had entered our neighbour's home when the door was left open. On hearing that Mary had not been to the house, we both went out to search the forest above us and the disused fields to the side, also peering through the great gaps between doors and door frames of the old uninhabited houses used for storage. Without any progress in our search, we returned home, and after only a few minutes, Stephen departed once more, telling me that he was going to ask our neighbours if they had seen Biscuit. The action of him going around the village alone to talk to people when he had little confidence and we relied greatly on each other for moral support speaks more than anything else about the anxiety he felt for his small charge. And when he returned home, once again, still without any news, he began to design a poster he would put on the village notice board and on lamp posts. The activities were a help in so much as they provided something to do, but the lost cat posters were not needed in the end, because 10 minutes past 5 o'clock, Biscuit walked into the kitchen with a meow as her only explanation for where she had been. Muffin had appeared a couple of minutes before, and if she was happy at Biscuit's return, she did not show it. Familia. The furry side of the family were enjoying their greater freedom, but the feathery ones had been confined to an area purposely built to maintain their distance from the plants we wished to grow. And this garden of their own had obviously gained approval from Patricia because she started laying eggs. Our female duck's initial interest in what she had produced was very limited, although she had ensured that they were in a safe place in a shallow indentation she had scooped out under her and Patrick's house. And within a few weeks there were 5 eggs in this nest. Over the 7 days, Patsy's excavations had ensured there was room enough for her to sit upon her clutch. And although Stephen and I did not know if Patrick had done what a male duck needs to do to become a dad, we decided we would give him the benefit of the doubt. And when the female duck did decide to sit, we would wait the 28 days needed for ducklings to hatch out. As a number of August days behind us overbalanced the ones in front of us, activity increased concerning the visits of my other sister, my brother, and their families. The annexed lemon room had a tree it was named after in a large pot outside by now, but inside it was still a concrete shell. Lynn, Stephen and I whitewashed the walls and assembled a couple of small cabinets Mary had given us. The old rug we had kept was taken out of its rolled up state in the corner, swept and put down on the floor for our inflatable mattress to be placed on top. And this was where my brother's 2 sons were going to lay their sleeping bags. An old sofa bed, which had been given to us by Chicken John, was aired and put in place for my niece and my youngest nephew to sleep on. And in Stephen's music room, Lynn made ready a chair which became a single futon for when she moved out of Logan. There were some things, such as removing one of the mattresses from the new sofa bed we ourselves had purchased, and this was going to be for my brother and sister-in-law to use on the floor of the winter room. But that would be arranged on the day the East Wing arrived. As before, Steve and I were once more vacating our room for Kim and Chris to sleep in, while we would be the ones moving to the separate building just inside the gate after Lynn left that, our sanctuary. The day arrived for more of the family to join us, and the 3 of us who were already in residence waited anxiously for the evening phone call that would inform us the 8 extra bodies had landed in Portugal. True to form, the weather brewed up a storm, and when the mobile rang, I answered to hear the panicked tones of my sister-in-law Jan informing us that they had been following the hire car Kim and Chris were in, but in the darkness and rain they had mistakenly followed a stranger's vehicle off the main roads and into the centre of Porto. Stephen had sent careful directions from the airport to Coimbra, but Des and Jan did not have a set in their car, and my brother suggested that they find somewhere to spend the night and try to find their way again in the morning. I tried to calm the anxious voices by assuring their owners that even in the confusion that is the centre of Porto, they would see signs to Lisbon, and these directions would ensure they joined a motorway from which they could exit at Coimbra. More phone calls were made between Jan, Kim and me in various combinations, and the reunited parties were soon less than an hour away. Lynn, Steve and I got into the car, and on arriving in Coimbra, we parked near the entrance to the Forum shopping centre, having chosen this as the meeting point because the name of the centre and of Continent, the hypermarket within the complex, are illuminated in large letters which can be seen soon after joining the road into Coimbra. Despite the rainy night, a little luck was on our side, because within a minute of the two hired cars pulling up and us getting out of our vehicles to greet each other, the letters above became dark outlines only. After the drive home, as we sat with cups of tea, it was Kim who remarked that for the first time in 20 years, she, Lynn, Des and I were living under the same roof. Our family had changed during the years we had lived apart. Although I knew Kim's children well, I had never really known my brother's two sons, James and Luke. But during the week, I began to understand that they were also people I got on with. The week passed with only a couple of memorable periods in which the inevitable tensions brought about when 11 people share a house surfaced. And a certain amount of credit has to be given to our home for the way its rooms and its surroundings accommodated us. Yet a great amount of credit was due to the people who had brought us up and the partners we now shared our lives with. "Your mum and dad must have been lovely people," Stephen commented as we lay in bed one night. They were. The 7 days passed quickly, and along with the Convento de Cristo in Tomar, we had an afternoon in the park beside the River Mondego in Coimbra, where we hired a couple of go-karts between us. Stephen and my nephew James came away with grazed knees and elbows from that. A few hours on, a couple of different occasions were spent swimming and splashing about in the pool near the wildlife park, which the East Wing returned to and made a lot more of than Steve and I had on the trip we paid it, accompanied by my hangover. There were afternoons my brother-in-law took the boys down to an area in Villanova where they kicked a football around with Portuguese teenagers who invited them to join in their game. And following a walk around our village, which incorporated the now inevitable stops and chats with neighbours, there were drinks with Manel tea. To the backdrop of the above, there were Kim and Des's concerns about and care for Milo. Our stray dog had by now accepted being fed opposite the old stone wash tubs a little down the track from us. But she would also be at our gate frequently for some companionship and water, which we put out for her. Our family's arrival in the rain led to Des's concern that Milo did not have shelter from the elements, and on one of his walks with my nephews, they came across an old straw mat, which they had laid under an overhanging roof of one old ruin, and some old bamboo canes were rearranged to construct what they hoped was an inconspicuous kennel. The four of them returned home pleased with their efforts and Milo's appreciation, which had been shown when she lay down and fell asleep in the prepared shelter before they had left her. Kim's main worry for the dog concerned the fleas, which had obviously decided to stay as Milo's health returned, and my sister insisted on buying some pet shampoo and the flea comb that she promptly used. It was a clean dog that accompanied us on a family walk through the forest the following day, and one that proved a good companion as she kept up with us and did not venture ahead, and who walked sprightlier with us than at any time before. I do not understand what happened, because it was only the following morning that Milo came to our gate looking foul once more, and Des noticed the dog had not eaten the food he had put out for her the day before. It was a Sunday, and the day the family were packing up to leave and return to England. So we kept an eye on Milo, who seemed reluctant to leave us. And with Kim and Des insisting that they would pay the bill for any treatment, it was decided that Steve and I would take her to the vets the next day. When Monday morning arrived, it was as if the time from first seeing the dog on that evening in July until now had not elapsed. Because as I sat against the back wall of our garden, in the morning sunshine, it was a weak, shivering body that I cradled. Oh yes, when morning arrived, it was as if the time from first seeing the dog on that evening in July until now had not elapsed. Because as I sat against the back wall of our garden in the morning sunshine, it was a weak, shivering body that I cradled in my arms while Stephen started the car. The vet told us that Milo was an old dog, and that the reason her head hung low and to one side was probably due to an accident or ill treatment early in her life. On top of this, she was all but blind and had ailments which would require medication for the rest of her life. It would be best to have her put to sleep, was the advice. The week I'd spent with my immediate family had left me with two sharp contrasting moments. For the main meal, our dinner table was fully extended to accommodate 6 people. The smaller square table from the veranda was joined to this. Seats were gathered from outside and from the piano, and every day felt like a Christmas day from my childhood. A time when Auntie Eileen, Uncle Charlie, my cousin Helen, and anyone who was alone had an invitation to join us. However, the evident warmth and concern my brother and sister showed for Milo had made me feel estranged from them. Des and Kim had acted on instinct, while I had viewed the situation of a stray dog practically, and as a result, my actions must have appeared cold. An example being when I'd heard our neighbours chasing Milo away from just beyond our gate. Maria had a stick in her hand, which I heard hitting the ground behind Milo, and instead of intervening, I'd stayed hidden, afraid to be seen as an outsider who did not understand country ways. The decision to fit in, the choice Stephen and I made to discourage and prevent Milo from entering our garden, and the detachment I showed to her were sensible decisions, but I lived with them every time. Sorry again. The decision to fit in, the choice Stephen and I made to discourage and prevent Milo from entering our garden, and the detachment I showed to her were sensible decisions. But I lived with them every time I passed an old mat under a shelter of canes, which had warmed a friendless animal more than just physically.